My analysis is that Somaliland's benefit is also, ironically, its weakness. It's a blank slate. You're starting afresh. And that's a very rare thing in modern geopolitical sort of terms, where you really, a self-governing nation that has built its institutions, not from the outside, but through this intervention, that UN trusteeship, that sort of, it's everything's organic here.
Pursuing the legal trajectory for Somaliland, I think there is very good progress on that. And inshallah, tomorrow you will hear some good news. Yep.
I mean, we want to talk to you about that because when Israel recognized Somaliland last year, it placed Somaliland in the international spotlight. A lot of people had never heard of Somaliland before, and suddenly they were reading about it. Yeah. And you were one of the people who succeeded in securing those negotiations successfully with Israel and gaining that recognition. Can you tell us the story, the inside story of how you managed to achieve that recognition with Israel?
Where do you think Somaliland sits in that picture when it comes to this emerging competition around the Horn of Africa?
So before we begin, as we normally do with our podcast, we just wanted to introduce ourselves to you. So my name is Jake Wallace-Simons. I'm a journalist from the UK. I write for the Daily Telegraph newspaper. And I've been doing this podcast called The Brink for about 7 or 8 months with Andrew. So Andrew will introduce himself as well.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for coming. My name's Andrew Fox. I'm a retired British Army officer. I served for 16 years. I was a paratrooper. I served in Afghanistan, Northern Ireland, Bosnia, as well as around the Middle East. I'm now a senior fellow at the Henry Jackson Society, which is a think tank in Westminster in London. And my output from this trip, as well as the Brink podcast, is a policy paper which will be submitted to the UK government arguing for the United Kingdom to recognise Somaliland as a state.
Okay, so that's us. That's what we're trying to achieve. So we can start as we normally do. We're recording. Everything's live. Yeah. Okay. Is the sound okay? It sounds a bit. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's give it a go.
Okay. So welcome to the Brink. It's my pleasure to introduce to you a man you probably already know, Raghi Omar. So born in Hargeisa, but raised in the UK. After studying modern history at Oxford, he commenced a stellar career in journalism, which includes the BBC, famous for his live reporting on the Iraq War, Al Jazeera, and now ITV. So Raghi, welcome to the Brink.
It's very nice to be with you. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, and I'm going to introduce, in addition to Raghi, our second guest is Jama Abdullahi Egal, who is Somaliland's senior advisor to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Jama, you played a key role in the negotiations with Israel that led to recognition last year. So welcome to both of you. And this is our second ever foreign recording of the Brink. Our first one was in Ukraine. This is our second one. And we've had a lovely time here in Somaliland so far. And we're looking forward to the celebrations of Liberation Day tomorrow. So thank you all for coming.
And so this evening we're going to have a conversation with our guests. Once we've finished speaking to them, this is with the idea in mind that we're talking to a British audience to educate them about Somaliland and educate them about why Somaliland should be recognised by the UK. We'll then take a very brief pause, and then we'll take your questions where you can ask us our opinions, or you can tell us what you think we need to know. So that will be the second half of this evening's event. But we'll start with Raghi, if we may. We're recording this on Sunday, the day before your Liberation Day. There are rumours that the UAE might well recognise Somaliland. What would that mean to Somaliland as an overview for our viewers at home who might not know much about this country?
Well, if that was to happen, I mean, obviously it would be hugely welcomed by everyone, man, woman and child in Somaliland. It would add to, I think, the political and strategic momentum behind Somaliland's, 3.5-decade-long quest for recognition and independence and the recognition of its sovereignty. It would begin to put another crack into that dam that was established, obviously, with the recognition by Israel that my colleague, Minister Chama, will talk about. I think it just means more momentum. And I think it will be very important if it is the UAE, because obviously Somaliland's recognition by Israel was, use whatever word you want, controversial, seismic, difficult, for all the obvious reasons. But I think that a leading Muslim Arab country following through on that will somehow square a circle, if you see what I mean, for Somaliland as a Muslim country, and with a lot of sort of links historically with the UAE, but also with the rest of the Gulf. So it would be another step forward.
And for those who aren't familiar with Somaliland's story, how did Somaliland get to this point?
Okay, here's a thumbnail sketch of Somaliland. There are other people who are much more informed than I am, and certainly sort of Jama. I might throw this to you because I will get some facts wrong. Okay, so Britain, Somaliland was a British protectorate going back, 50s and earlier, and up to the sort of 60s. The rest of Somalia was an Italian colony, and both Somalia and Somaliland got their independence within 6 days of each other. The British protectorate handed over sovereignty to Somaliland and was recognized, Somaliland, by 35 countries, so it was an independent state recognized as such by the UK, the US, the Soviet Union, Israel, amazingly, only a little bit older. And then 6 days later, Somalia, present-day sort of Somalia, got its recognition. Now, this was in the 60s where Pan-Africanism and African unity, winds of change under Macmillan were very much part of the historical narrative. And, Somalis, all Somali-speaking peoples are essentially, it's not like Yugoslavia where, there was a clear identity between Bosnians and Croats, or even take something like Belgium, between the Flemish and the Belgians. It's the same people, effectively. You can go from all over the sort of Somali-speaking region and there won't be any sort of difference. So because of that, Somaliland decided to join with Somalia into the Somali Republic. The history's all there. It ended up, it wasn't a happy sort of arrangement. It ended up in a civil war. Somaliland was felt unfairly targeted by the Siad Barre regime. At the end of that civil war, Somaliland liberated itself, which is what the celebrations tomorrow are about, and declared independence, but was not recognized. So it's been in that limbo for 35 years. I think I got that right.
I think I'm not sure the sound caught you that well, but is your microphone working okay?
I think it's working okay.
Oh, now it's working okay.
Jama, did I get all that right, pretty much?
Yeah, sorry, I tried to cover. I think, yes, as you said, Somaliland case was, I would say, the struggle, the latest struggle has taken over 60 years. And it started with the advent of the failed coup of our young military officers who have seen the dissatisfaction with the merger. Nowadays, actually, we don't talk about union at all because there has not been a ratified act of union. So sometimes the word of like separation or like secession or is not valid at all because there was not legally any act of union or kind of, but it was kind of a merger which has then failed. But it started, yes, but it had some episodes, I would say, like 61 and then 1981 when the armed faction was formed. And then in '88 when the war broke out here, started here in Boro and then Hargeisa, and took 3 years of, massacre of the society and the migration, displacement, and then 1991, which was the independence, declaration of the restoration of the Somaliland. We say Qaranimo. We don't talk about even. It has been reinstated and restored. And then another, I think the last episode was 26 December 2025, when the first recognition, international recognition has come. So Somaliland story has been, and struggle was not like born yesterday when Somaliland was recognized by Israel, as so many, remember Somalia with this recognition of Israel. Yeah.
I mean, we want to talk to you about that because when Israel recognized Somaliland last year, it placed Somaliland in the international spotlight. A lot of people had never heard of Somaliland before, and suddenly they were reading about it. Yeah. And you were one of the people who succeeded in securing those negotiations successfully with Israel and gaining that recognition. Can you tell us the story, the inside story of how you managed to achieve that recognition with Israel?
Yeah, I would start by continuing what I was saying, that as you said, like Somaliland came out after that recognition of Israel. But the story is for us, from a Somaliland perspective, is kind of downplayed. Our story, our struggle, our case is usually downplayed by titles like Israel's recognition of Somaliland. Israel recognized Somaliland. We have a story. We have our own trajectory to independence and to recognition. So our story, as I mentioned before, was that has continued. So we usually, we have attracted so many journalists and media and, of course, researchers asking why. I think the simple why is simply because Somaliland has been struggling and has been looking for a recognition, and Israel has become the country that has recognize Somaliland as well. So they recognize our story, our struggle, our case, our cause. And so that is, I think, our perspective is coming from that, not other way that Israel has agenda. Of course, Israel has its own attachments, as we have our own.
And when did the negotiations begin?
In fact, there has been, on and off discussions and engagements that Somaliland has been making over the last 10 years with so many countries. And the engagement has been in different levels and up and down. And Israel, I think, was one of those countries that there has been some on and off engagements.
Because you wrote a letter to all the countries in the world, didn't you?
Sorry?
You wrote a letter to all the countries.
That was one of the story. Part of the story was last year, exactly like tomorrow, our president has signed a letter and it was sent to 93 members of the UN? All of them were sent. And very few countries responded. Still, there is some discussion with some of them based on that letter. And even those who want to kind of look again to Somaliland case, they start with that letter because it is very good opening. And it included, actually, we sent all the way to Trump, to Netanyahu, to King Salman, Erdogan, even Ismail Omar Gelle, Hassan Sheikh, everyone.
And how many people replied?
Presidents of Somalia and Djibouti.
The president of Somalia, right? I think now not anymore because yesterday, was it the day before yesterday when the mandate ended? But anyway, yes. So it was That letter was kind of the part of it. And then, of course, there was a positive response, and the discussion started. But the discussions and engagements were way before that. Yeah.
Right. And can you talk to us a bit about, did you visit Israel to engage in those negotiations, and what was that like?
Yes, of course. There were cross visits and in different occasions, and the questions were like, our message was very clear. We want recognition, and because we believe after you become someone, because now you are like inexistent in the international arena. So after you become someone, then you can talk about the rest, like economic investment and so on. So for us, we were always very clear. Our political agenda and recognition was on the table. And then the discussions were why, and they had to study our case. And they had to find documentations, and one of the, I think, great documents they found was the African Union fact-finding mission in 2006 that has certified that Somaliland is not contrary to the African Union Act that calls for preservation of colonial borders. In fact, Somaliland, that kind of act reinforces the case of Somaliland, as Somaliland was a colonial border, and there is no any violation of that. So that was, they look at the legal aspect, they look at the human rights aspect, they look at an historical aspect, as well as political. And they, of course, it's not hidden that they were also looking for other alliances, whom they can exchange, leverages and collaborate.
Now, when we were speaking yesterday,
Yeah.
you said this very powerful line, which was that you said to the Israelis, if you recognize Somaliland, you will have...
Well, I think, sorry if I jump in, it was
Yeah.
actually the interesting thing was when it was asked, well, what's in it for you, effectively?
Yeah, so what's in it for Israel?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you respond when
Yeah.
you wanted to know?
Yeah.
What did the Israel? Because everyone thought, military this, security that, but it was another point that came up.
Yeah. And this is actually, yes, one of the, great first perceptions that come, like why Israel recognized Somaliland, is simply what comes to mind is the geopolitical location of Somaliland, geostrategy issues, Bab el-Mandeb, and so on. But it was not there at all. And what was there was, our message was clear. We had 3 messages to them, which were carried from our president. And they were recognition, recognition, and recognition. And then the question was, okay, what is our benefit, the kind of it. And the answer came from one of the team. It's very interesting that, you will have 6 million Muslims, Sunni, where Israel, Israel will find in their hearts, because we knew our people know that the political survival is the actual survival of their existence as a nation. And they sat back and said, well, I think, and that had made an impact on their thinking about us. And that has been actually, I would say, become reality. In the day, it was Friday afternoon when the recognition happened. And in the night, our people were celebrating across the country, also abroad. And we don't know, because it was completely secret process. So there was no any talk about Israeli flag or that sort of thing, because it would raise any suspicion. But we found the flags in the streets, and people were waving, and then I remember one of us sent a picture of a clip of that to those who were in the meeting, and said, "Do you remember what we said?" and it was like, yes, 100%. So I think they have their own interests and other calculations, but I think this was a time that Israel needed other alliances, and also Israel to play out its own moral story, moral story. Yeah. So
and speaking of the people of Somaliland, what does not being recognised by the wider world mean to them on a day-to-day basis? So never mind governments and states. Like, if you're an ordinary Somalilander, what difference does it make whether you're recognised or not? How does it impact their lives on a daily basis?
I remember, the Epstein stories. There was one story about Somaliland, and it was a story that the owner of this hotel has been negotiating with other partners, international partners, and he was explaining the restrictions that Somaliland faces and the lack of recognition, how they suffer with the lack of recognition. You talk about, and basically you don't exist. And second, you are attributed to be ruled by another country that does not exist or did not exist for decades. You are kind of, imagine like you talk about insurance. You don't find insurance. You don't have access to international financial systems. Even sending money to here, maybe through the indirect hawala or transfer system, but not. So basically, you are not existing. And then our people, if you want, we have some natural resources like the franc scheme. You want to sell to the world. You need certificate of origin from a recognized authority, which you don't have. I'm not an economist, but if you discuss the only economic, obstacles that our people have been suffering for the last more than 30 years, is like something you cannot quantify.
There's one very clear British linked example, actually. So King's College London oversee the training and graduation of doctors in Hargeisa Medical School. I mean, sorry?
Yeah, but closer.
So the Hargeisa University Medical School produces around 24 doctors. They're all UK trained, UK examined, and every year a delegation from King's College London comes out and does an oral examination at the end of the 7 years. So they are basically British GPs. So what a resource, right? In one of those sort of poorest countries, there's only one tertiary hospital in the whole of this country. But in order to move beyond being a general practitioner, a doctor, you need to train with orthopedics or vascular surgeons and so forth. That doesn't exist. So all of that money and training that has gone into producing doctors, they have to leave Somaliland in order to get that training. So it's a totally self-defeating process. I mean, here's King's College London, trains doctors, and in order to continue their education, they've got to go. So that's just one little example of a vital sort of thing.
Like if you're running a country like driving a car, it's like having the handbrake on the whole time with someone throwing sand in the gearbox.
Yeah, exactly. And taking out the petrol.
And Raghi, from the point of view of Britain, I mean, if you had the opportunity to address our Prime Minister or whomever replaces him, all of whom are equally incompetent in my view, but that's a
no comment from
subject.
me.
If you had the opportunity to make Somaliland's case to Downing Street, to London, to persuade them to recognise Somaliland, what would you say? Imagine Andrew's Keir Starmer.
That's a really interesting.
Maybe yeah. So I'll start again. I think that's a really interesting question, but it cuts both ways because the UK really knows Somaliland's story. I mean, there's been long historic links. There have been. Hello? Yeah. Okay. So the UK knows the case for Somaliland very well. There's been strong sort of engagement in terms of not just health, as I was mentioning, diplomacy, military contacts, etc., etc. So the case is sort of there. I turn in some ways the question back because I mean the title of this talk actually is really interesting. It's Somaliland, East Africa's brightest hope ? The ingredients are all there. I mean, there's no one can sort of doubt it. It's a 5+ peaceful transfers of power, 1 terrorist attack in 30 years, which is a hell of a lot less than France, Britain, the United States, etc., etc. I mean, there's all the ingredients and the boxes are sort of ticked. But we know in this world, especially very sort of competitive, fractured world, being really good, democracy and stable isn't enough. I mean, it's a realpolitik world. So I think the question for Somaliland is, it's like a sort of a team. You can have all the talent of, the best football player, but you've got to be a member of the team. So what does Somaliland offer the strategic answers to for potential allies? I mean, Somaliland has all these ingredients. So in some ways, Somaliland hasn't had to make that case for 30 years because it's had to maintain stability and get recognition. Now recognition has come. It's, okay, we are an answer to a lot of people's problems, for Ethiopia, even for Somalia, actually. Somaliland's recognition, I think, would be a real benefit in many different ways. For the Gulf countries, for the United States, for Israel. So the case is there. We now, as a recognized country, have to make that case. But the UK, I think it boils down to, in this world, Somaliland has made a bet on whose side it's on in the regional dynamics. Okay, we all know what's happening whether it's on the question of the Bab el Mandab or the conflict in the Gulf and so forth. It is a democratic, liberal values, pro-Western country. I think some Western countries have to decide whose side they're on as well, and I think that's fundamentally the case. There are values and there are also self-interests. But which one comes first? So that's the case I'd make. I mean, it's just pick a side.
And it doesn't seem to be very easy for Western countries to make that decision because, I mean, Britain, for example, has given more than £60 million to Somalia since 2021. None of that money really, or not much of it, has come down to Somaliland, which is the friendly bit, rather than the Islamist and fragile, incompetent bit. You'd have thought that somewhere the penny will have dropped, whether it's in the Foreign Office or in Downing Street or the MOD, and somebody would have said, actually, I think it would be wiser to do things differently.
I think it's the reality that it's very different. That the United States has poured billions of dollars into, and it has very clear counterterrorism and national security interests in Somalia. I mean, that's just a given. That's not going to go away. But I've always thought it doesn't have to be one or the other. I mean, it's not a case of you're either on that side of the room or the other side. I mean, that doesn't exist, and I think that's probably what officials in London, Washington, wherever else have sort of said. But it's finding a part of this region where things work and actually boosting it and not presenting that as somehow a slight to the other side. I mean, there's no reason why supporting Somalia should be to the detriment of Somalia or vice versa. And I'm a real believer, actually, because the point for a UK audience, and this is really important, is that there are many Somalis in Somaliland. There's many Somalilanders. It's not a problem on a people-to-people basis. It's not that. It's not like in Northern Ireland, where there was a real, a divide between communities. There are people coming backwards and forwards, opening businesses in both areas. It's always been a question of governance. That's where the problem is. And that's the bit I think that Somalilanders don't want to give up, who have family, by the way, in Mogadishu and anywhere else. but it's this bit works. I want this bit. It's got nothing else to do with that. It's just I feel safer and I can do more work and be safer here.
Yep.
So go ahead.
I think I would say like one of the main, not only UK, but also other European Union, many European Union member states, as well as the US, they have this assumption that, so it is always, I think there is a very negative assumption that supporting Somaliland recognition or is kind of synonym to diverting from counterterrorism. That is what also the apparently actually when Somalia wants to make a case to oppose Somaliland recognition, they raise that issue that the war against terror will be, damaged or kind of reduced because of the recognition of Somaliland. While in fact you have that Somaliland had never had any problem with the terrorism and violent extremism and has sustained itself. We pay our military, we pay our police, we pay our tax is enough to cover our costs. We are not, and then even if you take that one and you look at Somalia, where I used to work as a peace builder, it's very interesting that everybody now remembers the recent history when Somali army from Mogadishu has captured Baydhabo and have traveled 300 kilometers all the way to Baydhabo from Mogadishu. And that route was called Baydhabo Corridor, or it had different names in every 5 years, where a lot of funds, mainly UK funds, were spent to open that corridor. And it was opened in few days when it became a political interest of the politicians. I mean, if you look just to that, what kind of failure are you rewarding, and what kind of success are you punishing when you have that kind of assumption?
And so let's talk more widely about the region itself, because I think we can make a case that in the last maybe even 2-3 years, we've seen a real strategic change around this part of the world, around the Horn of Africa and around the Yemeni side of the Arab Peninsula, where the Houthis have been shutting the Red Sea and access to the Suez Canal. We've seen Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz, and I think it's created a lesson for the world as just how important these corridors are. They're far more than just movement corridors. They're absolutely strategically vital points. And on top of that, we're seeing a resurgence of almost great power competition with middle power competition thrown in as well. So it's a very complicated mix. And of course, we have Djibouti in the west, which has heavy Chinese influence. We have Somalia to the east with heavy Turkish, Qatari, American influence, and there's a real mix of competition in there. The Turkish with control of the port in Mogadishu and the airfield. Where do you think Somaliland sits in that picture when it comes to this emerging competition around the Horn of Africa?
Is that right? Yeah.
I'll start off just from a sort of analysis sort of point of view. It's not out of the frying pan into the fire, but in some ways, I think what Jamaat was saying is right on point, is that the fact that Somaliland has not been recognized has not meant that it has had to be very astute and careful at weathering lots of different storms over the last 35 years. It's quite an actual mature statecraft that it's had to do, even more so because of the fact that it's been vulnerable without recognition. When you have recognition, you have diplomatic cover, you can have alliances, you can have trade agreements. When you're on your own, without any of those things, in a very rough neighborhood, you've got to be even lighter on your feet, like a sort of boxer dancing, trying to evade the sort of punches. And it's actually set it up really, really well. But as I was saying earlier, once you are recognized, you have, chosen alliances, and that means, alliances force you into certain sort of choices, whereas before you could sort of sit it out. My analysis is that Somaliland's benefit is also, ironically, its weakness. It's a blank slate. You're starting afresh. And that's a very rare thing in modern geopolitical sort of terms, where you really, a self-governing nation that has built its institutions, not from the outside, but through, this intervention, that UN trusteeship, that sort of, it's everything's organic here. It may not be much to the outside world, but it's real, it's touchable, and it functions, and it's self-sustaining. So that's number one. Number two is security, which is, of course, your area of expertise. Where are the threats coming from, and for what reason? That you forgot. I mean, there's also China is another thing. Somaliland tested the waters. It's chosen all the really difficult countries. It partnered with Taiwan and then straight to Israel. I sort of probably, well, like you two guys, your first foreign podcast was Ukraine. Now you've chosen Somalia. You've chosen all the difficult places as well. But I think that it breeds a kind of a sharpness and a savviness. But the security complement, I think, is very, because people don't want it to work. People don't want other countries, whether it's the UAE, to sort of come forward. And there are little fires being started. We all know that. But the one thing that I'd also say that Somaliland really has going for it is it has maintained its peace and stability through consensus building. So even, everyone knows about this conflict in the east. Lots of people have been involved in trying to find a negotiated way out of that. It hasn't been through us, and Jama sort of one of them, Abdelkader Jidde, there's another gentleman who has. So that's really important, that it's got this, ability to sort of seek consensus and stability first. But it's got to force, take alliances, and that's going to force it into positions which it hasn't had to before.
I think, yes, as you said, Somaliland is exposed. You cannot, before the recognition, Somaliland was, and even Somalia, the way Somalia even saw Somaliland, and the way even Djibouti, the way it behaved now after the recognition, and the way it perceived Somaliland before, and the way Egypt perceived Somaliland before, and the way even Turkey has not only perceived but played in some in kind of some maneuvering and actually very overt politics, like participating in the Eastern administration inauguration and so on. I mean, if you look, Somaliland is exposed. Before, Somaliland was kind of seen like roving around here and with not that much, effective in international politics, regional politics, and so on. But now everybody is reckoning on Somaliland. After the MOU which Somaliland signed with Ethiopia, I think it is only from there that there has been a lot of shock and awakening what Somaliland can do and what Somaliland can be. Somaliland is exposed, and in Somali we have a Somali proverb that says, "Lawatan jir mudug jooga ilahay uma xil qarin." So you are challenged. It's one of the Somali regions where there is a lot of violence. So if you are in the 20s, you are in trouble. Basically, Somaliland has to, take the stage that it has to take, and you make enemies because of what you want and who you want to be, and I think Somaliland is ready for that, and I think Somaliland strategic location has already, I think, in the late 1800s, when UK even was attracted to position itself in Somaliland, was because of this. They were based in Aden, and they had to find, extend into Somaliland for the same reasons that are on the table today, the Bab el-Mandeb and the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden.
Because you talk about the problems that Somaliland exposes itself to, they're connected to lack of recognition, aren't they? Because there was the Taiwanese passport travel ban at one point, wasn't there?
Yeah.
If you could explain that and how that's connected to...
Yep, of course. It started, some people think the e-visa started because of the recognition. No, it was before the recognition. And it was specifically targeted to the Taiwanese in the first place. So there was the Hargeisa Group Hospital is being funded, expansion of that hospital is being funded by Taiwan. So there was the minister for, one of the ministers of Taiwan was on his way to do the foundation stone, to set the foundation stone for the hospital. And Somalia found the information. Actually, China found it. And then Somalia, foreign minister, has written a letter banning all the Taiwanese passport holders to come to Somalia, in that case also including Somaliland. It started from there, and I think it went all the way to the US, that the Somali ambassador in Washington had to meet some of the senators and explain the case. It went very bad. And then they retracted, but they again brought the e-visa. And now the e-visa is more of a target to the Israelis and also other foreign visitors. Because if you are of a Somali origin, whether you are from Somaliland or from anywhere else, you don't have a problem to get the e-visa. But once they see the system recognizes Israel or Taiwan, then it automatically rejects. Yeah.
So we're going to go to questions in a minute, but just before we do, Raghi, I wanted just to offer a reflection to your observation about how we've been to Ukraine and we're here and we talk about Israel and Taiwan and things, that might give an insight into the sort of culture in Britain that leads people not to do things that are obviously right, like recognizing Somaliland. And I think that it's that, Israel and Taiwan have something in common, which is they're both threatened by a tyrannical enemy of some sort, whether it's China, whether it's Iran and its proxies. And the Iranian people have that in common too, that they're facing a tyrannical Islamist regime. Similarly, not the same, but it also resonates here, where recent history of attempted genocide and great suffering facing a real threat. And it feels like people who have really experienced that tyranny know what real life is and what the value of freedom is. And they tend to stick together. So if you go to Ukrainians, you go to Taiwanese, you go to Israelis, Somalilanders, they'll all support each other. Just take Israel as an example. The Iranian people love Israel. Ukrainians love Israel, same with Taiwanese and here. And I think that the contrast is that in the West, in Britain, where we're from and elsewhere, there's a lot of people who have never had to experience facing tyranny and real suffering and fight for freedom. And so they have, in a way, the luxury of indulging their own politics that's not really about the costs that is faced by other people in the world. It's more about their own political positioning. And that can lead to an insulation from the real world that then can lead to this kind of hypocrisy. That's my reflection. I wonder what you would think of that.
That's a really interesting sort of point. I think, things are, as you've, been here for sort of several days. Obviously, you both knew about it. It's in your worldview because of the work that you both do. Things are very, very real. I, for my work, reported, from Israel since 1997. We were there at the same time at one point. I just remember the first time going there, and way, way, way before sort of, Gaza, I can't remember 2000 and something or other, and I was just waiting for a bus, and you notice that there are bomb shelters in bus stops, and like here, I was telling you the story yesterday about how there is the real sort of, you said, well, how come, with all this, violence and that has unfortunately affected so many people in the rest of Somalia. How come that kind of violence and bombings, don't happen here? It's because security really matters on a day-to-day basis, and people are aware if there's dodgy people moving in next door, they'll call the authorities and say, I think something's up. So I think that's a common sort of issue. I think also from my perspective, and we talked about this earlier, and it's worth explaining both to a UK audience and the audience here. We've all been to places like up here, to Kabul or Baghdad and so forth. And when you see Western, powers and their strategists and diplomats and NGO workers and so forth, in that context, they're playing a almost sort of semi-divine position. I mean, if you go to the airport Halane in Mogadishu, a young British, Danish, Dutch, diplomat has as much power and influence as a lot of sort of civil servants, because the money that Somalia survives on and the structural support, the payment of the soldiers comes from those. But here it's slightly different. I think there's a frustration in the West that that they're not needed that much. I mean, things have sort of worked. I mean, how many aid agency cars do you see driving around Hargeisa? How many UN emblazoned Toyota and Pajeros, do you see? And
many more in Israel.
Exactly. So I'm speaking purely as a journalist. There's a kind of frustration that this has kind of worked and it can't. That phrase, not invented here. Senior officials, don't like things that have worked if those ideas were invented somewhere else. So I think that's another sort of aspect to it. I mean, it's just my observation.
So, I mean, having been one of the Somaliland activists is since maybe the 2000 and a bit earlier, we found out in the beginning there was, the local context was that let's do things right. So then we get rewarded. Let's do elections, let's do peace, let's do stability, let's do this and that, so that there are good people around there, they will look what we are doing, and they will like, and they will support us, and they will look to our cause. I think the recent history has proven that's not right. I think it's basically, as Rajada was saying, what those in office can see, of course, basically the national interests for their country, and also the narratives or the stories that are brought up for them. For example, we had in this region, when you list the number of presidents that have changed in this East Africa, I think Somaliland doubles almost everyone. So for the last 30 years, how many presidents have changed peacefully? Political parties were formed and took office. We have some miracles actually, but we believe that Somaliland has done so many things that should be rewarded. Somaliland should be rewarded too. For example, there was one of the opposition political parties candidates lost with only 83 votes. And the one who lost was a former, a veteran fighter belonging to the faction, to the armed faction. And the one who won with only 83 votes was not, with the mainstream, as we know in any country that goes under a conflict. Always the so-called heroes and the veterans, war veterans, are those who, kind of have a lot of immunity, to do whatever and impunity. 2 times opposition parties changed, have won, with some of them with landslide, almost close to 70%, of the votes in a credible elections. So we were thinking that those things would take us to, to be good people and to be rewarded, but it hasn't happened. Yeah.
I think that's a really important point. it's a sort of a brutal realization that success and good governance and, you know, peaceful transfers of power doesn't get rewarded, you know, and that's life, isn't it?
Nice last.
Exactly. I mean, it's just sort of, you know, the good behavior doesn't get sort of rewarded, and the problem child is the one that's always taken note of. I mean, that's just life, and I think. But I was really pleased to hear that from Chama, because it's just a brutal awakening. You sort of think, well, if we do this, if we do that, do everything that's in the rule book, you know, we'll happy days. But it's not like that. And it brings me back to the point I was making earlier, which is I think just Somaliland now needs to articulate really in just hard power. You have this problem, UK, US, UAE, India, Ethiopia, right? And it really matters to you, okay? We've got a solution, but here's our price. And just forget all that stuff about elections and human rights and all of that. I just think you have to sort of think of yourself, how am I, you know, what is the solution that the person I want recognition from wants? You know, with Jama, you know, eloquently said what the answer for Israel was. Now, what's that question for the UK? I mean, or anyone else?
Right. Well, let's take some questions from you. So we've got somebody with a microphone, have we? Or you can borrow one of ours. Yeah. So if you want to just explain who you are first, and then Raghi, did you want to point out who?
My name is Muhammad Thani. I'm not a journalist, but I am a voracious reader of what journalists write. So I like journalists. In this house, we are, I think me and Abdi are the oldest. Abdi Bihi, only Muhammad Bihi is older by 2 years. So you can see how, where I come from is like this. I was associated with journalists in Somaliland in the days of Qarn Afrika, Liwa, Saraha. They were the ones who were produced at that time. The quality, I know what it was. Then I was in Mogadishu when also the 5 Arabic newspapers and the Italian elite was producing the Tribune, and Dalka was for the Anglophone. Again, I knew what was the level. What I wanted from this meeting was, we have introduced an international standard administrators, starting with Abdurrahim Abi in the Cordwellheim when he was so he was the first under secretary in the whole third world. Then followed by Mr. Mohammed B. Yunis. So others then followed with Umar, Chama, so many in UNICEF and others. So what I am saying is that we created many good administrators in the international community. Yet we didn't get a journalist like, so I want to take the moral of Raga, who cracked his intelligence in the Iraq war with all its risks. So the young generation, please, I want you to clap for him and take that moral. Crack, you see, that from you. The other point I wanted to add was, when I was in Harvard, after I graduated in 95, it was 1 year before me. So I'm group of 95. I specialized on reforming. Of all the reforms I was doing for those 20 years and more, the most difficult reform is the reform of the media. You see, when we are reforming civil servants, it is not difficult. When we are saying privatize electricity, privatize water, all this, we know how to handle it. When it comes to media, it is very difficult. You will start, for example, with licensing, and then they will say, who will give the license? If the government gives the license, it will hit those whom she doesn't like. We say, prepare a committee. It will have all the problems. So when we say educate them, you see, train them. So what we want is that fund the student, but there is no free lunch. Anybody who is giving you funds will require also that you have to so there is no free lunch, you see. So the idea here is how to build our younger generation, improve their, and then how to distinguish that, and that's the most difficult one, between local politics and international agenda. So we want, when we are facing the international agenda, to have one word for the international agenda. We are a country who want that all the, to be friendly with all countries, okay, but we want to be free alone.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening to you. My name is Ali. Somaliland from Hargeisa, as well as a British citizen from London. I've got 3 brief questions, and I'm going to ask those 2 brief questions Jama, since he's the senior pastor from the administration, perhaps Raga as well, given your experience on being a Somalilander. The first question is, you touch base the African Union Charter, which basically doesn't contravene with Somaliland's claim about being a new country or reinstating its sovereignty. Hence, why don't we, if that's the case, why don't we pursue the legal, why don't we pursue our claim through legal basis? Because I'm sure if we have that, under the international rules, that will merit some, it will go some way in terms of arguing our case. The next question is, Somaliland, over the last 35 years, although our struggle started longer, was supported by international community one way or another. Our institutions seem to be trained, even the younger generations who are now currently in the leadership, seem to develop a narrative which is often dictated on them by donors. You observe it, how they behave, how they conduct themselves. I don't know, that could be wrong. Could we own our destiny? Can we not determine how we narrate our story? The third question is, I'm going to be a critical charmer here. The third question is, look, the generation who are sitting here know nothing about 60s, 50s, 40s, 70s, 80s. I happen to be lucky to be alive in the 80s. And I've seen the struggles, the army struggles. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem we are very critical to ourselves. I'm one of these people who are scared that recognition now being attained and much has been promised to come the next few months or years could be a curse. Look at Sudan. History. Look at Sudan. Look at Nigeria with all its oil resources and the curse that the Delta community are going through. So have we ever considered these issues? Thank you.
So the last question was, if I understood, self-critical and like even the recognition or whatever, our statehood could become a curse, right? Like we could fail, like South Sudan. So we should not, yeah, thank you. Shall I answer? We wait, okay. Thank you very much. I think pursuing the legal trajectory for Somaliland, I think there is very good progress on that. And inshallah, tomorrow you will hear some good news. Yep. Yes, and then the IC support, yes, the international community supported Somaliland a lot. But we have to be very clear, and this is actually what I agree with you. Coming to your third question, international community used to support us humanitarianly, humanitarian support, maybe some social development, but it was usually because you are not a government. It was coming as a third, kind of handout, I would say, because it doesn't. Imagine, for example, Emirat have built the Berbera corridor, right, with more than 100 million US dollar. There has never been a project which could, fund something like that. Maybe later years we have seen World Bank doing some good investments, but that itself is not like the bilateral one. So one is you are a state, or then you get bilateral support and also multilateral. So what I want to say is that international community never supports your political process. And that's what you were saying. It is our own. For example, I give you one example. The one of the donors wanted to support during the pirates' time. Somaliland had its own coastal, our marine. We inherited some marine resources, and we used to protect our sea, prevent the piracy. So one of the donors wanted to support our maritime. So they said, we cannot support a marine because it's military, but we can support Coast Guard, which is a police, meaning civilian. You understand? So the aid that's coming from outside is not very critical. It's not supporting your political cause. They never support your recognition. Our priority was recognition from the beginning. Have you ever seen any NGO? They call it non-political, right? So it is already, left in the beginning. The third, I agree with you. We have to be sort of critical, and we have to own our own destiny. And of course, recognition is a means, not the aim. So how do we incentivize the recognition, and how do we, use it and become viable state is the biggest challenge for us.
I don't have the kind of fear of recognition being a curse, and I think the South Sudan example you raise proves it. I mean, look at the DP World Berber Port investment, and that's a huge nation-defining investment anywhere, not just in Somaliland. If you were to put that in South Africa or Nigeria, that would be a huge undertaking. It's a success. It functions. It's a world-class port. It was ranked, I think, number 3 in the recent World Bank report for port maritime efficiencies. That doesn't happen unless there's real substance in the place where it's built. So I got no fears about that, and I think it's because everything's been done organically. I think the reverse was the problem with South Sudan. There wasn't any substance there, Sally, and it was kind of foisted upon something that didn't sort of exist. I mean, I've got, close friends, and Mohammed Bihi Yunus worked in sort of Darfur and Sudan. It was just aid agency central. I mean, and I remember as a journalist covering it, that the South Sudanese government, very sadly, had so many Western advisors, legal advisors, political advisors, infrastructure advisors, that it didn't come organically from them. Do you see what I mean? Yeah. No, you're not being negative. It's very true. I'm just saying that actually it may not be much. And the converse was true of the Sudanese delegation. They just had little scrappy scrapbooks, but they really knew their brief, because they'd had that experience of governing a very large, difficult nation that had been through upheaval. So I think I'm not so sort of worried about that, because we've already seen the proof of the pudding.
Thank you very much. My name is Mohammed Bihi Yunus. As my colleague said, I was a former foreign minister of Somaliland, and I have been involved with the UN and African Development Bank with Mohammed. First, I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for really coming here and making this event happen here in Geeska and Somaliland. We really need more of similar broadcasts that can send the right message to the rest of the world about Somaliland's achievements and what we have done so far. When I was a foreign minister, I remember I was in London, and I was actually with Jason, and I was talking about we're stable, it's a secure country, we have stability, governance, etc. And then one guy said to me, listen, that's why people do not want to come to you, because if you have problems, people will know you. And I said, what do you expect us to do? He said, what you should do as a foreign minister, you should invite ISIS, Al-Shabaab, all of the terrorists in Hargeisa, and you will be on the limelight. But we have decided not to do so, and to be stable, to work hard. And I'm really happy that what Jama and his colleagues actually did in achieving what we have as this recognition. I was a foreign minister. We all tried to do the best that we can. This is a continuation of what we have done also in the past. But I should congratulate the good work that our colleagues have done this time. And I think we need to be working hand in hand with the government. We have our own weaknesses. We have our own difficulties and challenges. But at the same time, I think the public were extremely excited when we saw the recognition. I was here in Hargeisa. I was here on the 25th of December. And I really think the jubilation of the people of Somaliland to see that they have been recognized. I'll tell you a story. I was in Sydney as a foreign minister. And then the president called me and he said, Sheffield is recognizing Somaliland. So you have to fly from Sydney to Sheffield. So that's what recognition really meant to. I took a 30-hour flight to attend and be part of that recognition of Sheffield and Cardiff. So you could see what the importance of recognition. Inshallah, we are expecting to see more. I think we're doing a lot of good work. And I think we need to really get the support of similar people like you, journalists, to really let the rest of the world, and especially the UK, which I believe has a moral obligation to recognize Somaliland because they have been part of parcel of Somaliland. And I think we really need your support and your help to ensure that the message is loud and clear in the rest of the world on Somaliland's achievement. Thank you.
Thank you. I would love to speak Somali. However, my Somali is very poor, and most of the guests here will laugh at me. So I'll speak to English, and I'll only take 1 minute. And so my name is Ainanshe, but everybody calls me Sheikh Wallahi. I am one of those diasporas who was born here in Erigabo, but migrated quite young to Canada. Nonetheless, there's a whole team of us Say Wallahis or young diasporas who are coming back home. Yeah, exactly. There's a whole bunch of us, of Somaliland professionals. You know, I'm a quality control specialist. We got a doctor, we got an engineer, we got scientists, we got bankers, and we all want to come back and help the young people. Our uncle over here, Mohammed, he mentioned the fact that we got to support the next generation of Somaliland leaders. And if you look around the room, there's nothing but incredible, brilliant, young Somalilander professionals who just need the opportunity. So back to my 1 minute is maybe for your public policy paper, if you're able to position the paper from a quality of life angle or quality infrastructure angle, where providing mentorship, let's say, for example, the British Institute of Standards as well as Israel's Institute of Standards to provide mentorship opportunities for the young professionals here so they can have their educational credentials recognized. We can have our management systems here accredited as well as get the certification, but also getting our goods and trades opportunity to be accepted into various ports. And I'm just saying this because I come from a quality control perspective, but those pillars of quality infrastructure is going to go a long way. And I really hope you take a moment to just look around the room and how many young Somaliland, incredible next generation stars are in this room that want to do a difference, that want to support our country, and we want to take us to the next level. Is that okay?
Lack of opportunities that I tried to allude to earlier with regard to the King's College trained doctors. It is a big issue for any government, isn't it? I mean, because lack of opportunities in terms of their skills, exams, being certified, being accepted elsewhere. I mean, there are digital nomads, you can work remotely nowadays, but if no one accepts your thing, how much of that is a central policy of the government where countries might not recognize us, but may be able to, willing to sort of help in those bread and butter issues?
I think the restriction is that you earlier, Andrew, asked about what does it mean in the real life? I think this is linked to that as well. I remember one of my nephews graduated from Abarso University. And Somalia Ministry of Education does not accept Abarso as a secondary, they don't give the certification. So he's like still suffering to get certification for that. So this is like a clear example of how lack of recognition and lack of, become independence has been, the major problem and a burden on Somalilanders. Yes, I would like to mention here what is something that's not seen within the Somaliland society. And I was inspired that young man's appeal that young educated coming back to the country. In relation to that, I wanted to mention there is a generation gap that is unnoticed. But once you observe, you get shocked. The latest, before the Civil War, the latest secondary graduates were in 1987. So, and then the war broke out. And the second wave, or the first, I think, wave, which were like few, maybe 20 in a class that graduated secondary graduation in Hargeisa, for example, was early 2000, 2002, 3, 4. So you are talking about a generation of 17 years gap of lack of secondary graduation, 17 years. Times around 5,000 of those graduates before the Civil War were graduating from the Somaliland areas under Somaliland. So you have missed that 17 years secondary graduation, and this 17 years is growing. And now when you look back, people younger than me, I think the gap is 15 years, 14 years, and so on. And that means they were not, it's not that they were not learning, but there was a lot of unlearning as well. So they were learning some other things. And I think that burden and that negative, impact is not seen visually. But you see, when you see now, for example, our young, for example, MPs, most of them, if you see, they're young. They're those who graduated in the early 2000s. And who is between this? You can see there is a big gap. And that is why we appeal to all those Somalilanders in the world that have some sort of education to find their opportunities and come back and fill the gap. Thank you.
So I think coming to the end, but before we finish, it would be great if we could get one of the ladies here to ask a question. Can we pass that back? I think we've got 2 working microphones.
Good afternoon, good evening. Oh, it's almost evening. Thank you very much for actually having this this discussion that it really looks from different dimensions of what has been happening. I came back to Somaliland in 2000 from UK. And when I came here, it was a really chaotic place. We have too many different currencies. Each where you go, you have got a different currency here and there. There was nothing, no infrastructure was really rudimentary. There's nothing you can call it development at that time. Since then, anybody, and I remember in Hargeisa, if you take a car, you can go around Hargeisa for 1 hour. Now anybody, you cannot even reach it on the other side, forget having one. And what amazed me, and I think I have to congratulate our people, is the commitment for investing in their own country. If you see Hargeisa, all these buildings, all this infrastructure, 99% have to say is being done by the Somalilanders. And that amazed me all the time. That's why I don't think recognition or lack of it will not change. Actually, it will really, it shows the commitment, the dedication, and the belief that people really think that they have a nation they can build, regardless of investment or aid or, it doesn't matter. So to me, recognition is going to be a bonus for us because we already put all the ingredients on the ground. And all we need now is to have the few things that everybody was talking about, which is the problem is that the hindrance of lack of recognition. Otherwise, we are a nation. So I'm very proud of being in Somalilander, and I'm very proud of seeing this country, and I really, really appreciate when I see all the efforts and that we put into this country. So we hope the world could see that. We didn't have the peace dividend at all, but still, I think we are going somewhere. And there's no way anybody can hide that one. So for me, recognition is a bonus for us. Thank you.
Regarding e-visa, I cannot comprehend that e-visa problem cannot be solved as of today. For example, we know that Somalia now doesn't exist since yesterday. And yet, we have the problem of this e-visa. So what's holding this e-visa?
What can be done about the e-visa?
Yeah.
Businesses, as well as the travel, which is a basic human right for everyone. The current government is doing a lot of work. There are multiple, I think, channels or kind of processes, I would say, that are geared towards solving that problem. And we are very hopeful either it will be solved some way or another. But this is a reality, and this only shows other challenges ahead. In Somali, we say, in lagu hanto, in lagu hasusta ka horeysa. So for you to face challenges and difficulties, you have to be someone. You must be doing something right. I think this is a written question. How much an existential threat is lack of recognition? I think, existential threat nowadays, I think it is explained, but maybe if I would give Abdulqadir Tirde, if you would explain, you could be more articulate than me. Can I give you?
Okay, well, I think we're going to call time there. I'd like to thank, first of all, you, our audience, not only for joining us tonight, but to all of Somaliland for hosting Jake and I so well. And we're incredibly grateful and honoured to be joining you for your Liberation Day tomorrow. I'd also like to thank our guests, Ragi and Jama. I think you've given us an incredible insight into Somaliland, the challenges you face, but also the amazing successes you've had to date. And you've articulated brilliantly why the wider world should recognise Somaliland and the opportunities that presents. But for now, thank you very much, everyone, again. Thank you for joining us on The Brink. Until next time.